Hello everyone, welcome to this brand new video on our channel. As you already know that I have discussed the first phase of Robert's Rebellion in our earlier video, which I named the Merryweather phase after Aerys's hand Owen Merryweather. So let's start from where we left. As I have already told that after the Battle of Ashford, Aerys the second Targaryen removed Owen Merryweather from the post of Hand of the King because he had failed to contain the rebellion. So, Aerys appointed Rhaegar's friend and Lord of the Griffin Roost, the young Jon Connington, as the new hand, and hence our second phase will be known as the Connington Phase. The Connington Phase lasts from around Ashford until shortly after the Battle of Bells, and fighting in this phase is concentrated in the Reach and the Riverlands. The quote story unquote of this phase is how the rebels managed to turn a 3-1 disadvantage into a winning position. The timeline of events for the Connington Phase is something like this. The aftermath of the Battle of Ashford, the Siege of Storm's End, the Tullys join the rebels, the Battle of the Bells, and the double wedding at River Run. So, our focus for this phase is working out how the rebels got into a position to win the Trident and the war. We have been told in the books that the rebels had 35k men at the Battle of Trident, but there is no way that the North, the Vale, the rebels in the Riverlands, and Robert could muster 35k men at that point. I will go through the military capabilities of each of the region one by one so that you would get the idea about what I am saying. First comes the North. Whilst the North can field an army of 50k men in their own territory, they have never supplied an army of more than 30k below the neck. In addition to this, 283 AC was either the last year of winter or the first year of spring, and in either case, the majority of the North's population would be needed to plant the first harvest to avoid mass starvation. Ned is also on a really small timetable. He needs to get from the Fingers to White Harbour, then from White Harbour to Winterfell, and then get south within enough time to join with Robert and Jon Arryn. As such, I doubt Ned could have led anything more than 8k south, almost all of which would be cavalry, because time is of the essence here. Next is the Vale of Arryn. The Vale is in the best position out of any in the rebels with about 30k men against only 15k loyalists. However, the rebels had to win the siege of Gulltown and then defeat or besiege most of the other loyalist forces in the Vale. Whilst the Corbrays did switch sides, the rebels will have taken high casualties in the initial battles and will also have the same issue as the North, though to a lesser degree, with needing men to plant the harvest. As such, I doubt the rebels could have fielded more than 15k with a harvest to plant and the ongoing sieges and initial casualties. And now comes the Riverlands. The Riverlands are predominantly loyalist with a few rebels, whilst the rebel forces within the Riverlands could muster a total of 15k men. The Malisters will have left a significant portion of their forces to defend their ancestral seat Seaguard against the Ironborn. The Freys arrived to the battle late, and the Pipers were crushed by the Vances early in the war. As such, the Riverlands cannot have provided more than 8k at the Trident, and that is me being extremely optimistic. The Stormlands army. Their army is defeated at Ashford and disappears by Stony Sept. As it currently stands, there is no way Stormlanders were present at the Battle of the Trident. Based off all these calculations, the rebels had at best 30k men at Trident and more likely about 25k. So, as such, this part is based on these three questions. What happened to Robert's forces? How did the rebels get the men they needed to win at the Trident? And why did Mace Tyrell seemingly cripple the Targaryen cause? All three of these questions are inextricably linked together and also tie into the fate of our previous hand, Owen Merryweather, and Stannis' marriage to Celice Florent. I previously referenced to the fact in the earlier video that someone told Robert about the plans of Lord Grandison, Caffron and Fell, and here is as good a place as any to reveal who I think it is. It's Lucerys Velaryon, the Lord of Driftmark. Lucerys was on the small council as the master of ships, and as such would have known of the plan, but he spent most of his time with the royal fleet which shielded him from Aerys Targaryen. Lucerys failed to stop Robert from reaching the Stormlands when it should have been easy, and the Velaryons haven't been particularly close with the Targaryens for 200 years. It seems that Lucerys was leaking information about the loyalist plans to Robert, which allowed him to defeat the loyalists at Summerhall and escape the Stormlands fast enough to avoid being trapped by the Tyrells. Most of the articles on the net posits the idea that Robert marched to Long Table, the seat of House Merryweather, out of belief that he would find Merryweather loyalists willing to join him. However, I doubt the news could have reached Robert in time. Instead, I believe that Robert marched on Long Table out of necessity. With the loyalists' armies gathering in the Stormlands and the great Tyrell host pressing on his rear, Robert had to escape north to join his allies in the Riverlands. Upon reaching Long Table, the castle was given over to Robert by Merryweather loyalists who had nowhere else to turn. I would argue that Robert left his forces there and continued to Stony Sept, as controlling Long Table allows Robert to raid the Reach and to limit the movement of the Tyrells. I would also argue that Mace Tyrell split his forces after Ashford. Mace himself led about 20k men into Stormlands to take Storm's End. Someone else, presumably Mathis Rowan, led about 20k towards King's Landing, and Alester Florent led about 15k towards Long Table. At Long Table, Alester Florent defected to join Robert, providing an explanation for Stannis Baratheon's otherwise ridiculous marriage to Celice Florent, who is of the junior branch of House Florent after the completion of the war, when Stannis Baratheon was the most eligible bachelor of Westeros and could have been used to secure any alliance in whole of Westeros. Alistair's betrayal was also likely joined by the Green and Red Apple Fossoways, who are close to the Florents and went over to Stannis after Renly's death in our present story, when almost none of the Lords of Reach did. This decision will not have been popular with the other lords who had men with Alester Florent who were defeated in a battle outside Long Table. The Florents, Fossoways and remaining Baratheon forces stayed to hold Long Table with about 10k men, whilst Robert went north to Stony Sept. The second part of the Connington Phase is the Battle of the Bells, where Connington was defeated at Stony Sept. Jon Connington's army was about 25k strong, mostly made up of the loyalists from Riverlands and the Vale, as well as some forces from the Crown Lands. Whilst forces from the Reach and Dawn were on their way, Connington marched when he caught wind that Robert was hiding in Stony Sept. Fortunately for Robert, the armies of Ned Stark and Jon Arryn had arrived in the Riverlands. Joining with Hoster Tully and the other rebel lords in the Riverlands, they rode to Stony Sept to save Robert. Jon Connington's army was defeated, although with casualties for the rebels, and Connington's reluctance to put the town to sword crippled the loyalists, who received their first major crushing defeat. And then Aerys Targaryen realized that Robert was the greatest threat to his dynasty after Daemon won Blackfire. In the aftermath of the Battle of Bells, Ned Stark and Jon Arryn wed Catelyn and Lysa Tully respectively. Connington suffered the same fate as Owen Merryweather, and the routed loyalist army retreated westwards. So, with Jon Connington exiled, our second phase comes to an end, and so does this video. I will be back soon with yet another video in the fantasy lore. If you liked the video, don't forget to press the like button and share and subscribe the channel. Peace out, amigos.